The forecast assumed renewal. The numbers were stable. The relationship was steady. Quarterly reviews were calm. Nothing in the dashboard suggested departure. Then the email arrived. Subject line, next steps. It was brief, measured, professional. After careful consideration, the client had decided not to renew. No accusation, no escalation, no dramatic breakdown, just exit. Inside the organisation, the account had been described as solid. Revenue was predictable. Delivery milestones were met. Escalations were rare. Meetings were structured and efficient. If you had looked at the surface, you would have seen stability. And stability is persuasive. Months earlier, a subtle shift had been encouraged at leadership level. Client updates, it was suggested, had become overly cautious. Too many caveats. Too much visible uncertainty. Too many qualifications that diluted confidence. The decision was to present a clearer front. Stronger summaries, fewer disclaimers, more decisive language. The intention was reassurance. Clients, the thinking went, value confidence. They want clarity, not internal debate. They want direction, not hesitation. None of this was unreasonable. The belief underneath the decision was simple: that confidence strengthens trust. That uncertainty, once internally managed, does not need to be externally displayed. That alignment, once achieved in the team, can be projected outward without distortion. At first, the shift appeared to work. Client calls felt smoother. Presentations were tighter. Slides carried fewer defensive phrases. Instead of "we're monitoring this closely," the language became "this is under control." Instead of "there's some variability," it became "performance remains stable." Internally, the team still debated risk. They still flagged delivery pressure. They still worried about capacity and timing. But those conversations increasingly stayed inside the organisation. Externally, the message was simplified. Gradually, behaviour adjusted. Account leads began filtering more carefully. They asked themselves which uncertainties were truly necessary to share. If a risk was likely manageable, it was resolved before being mentioned. If an issue could be corrected quickly, it wasn't elevated preemptively. No one instructed concealment. No one fabricated certainty. They simply selected what felt appropriate for the client to see. Over time, selection became curation. Ambiguity was reduced in public forums. Tension was absorbed internally. Emerging friction with delivery timelines was framed as routine optimization. It felt professional. The first signal didn't look alarming. client questions became more detailed. They asked for supporting evidence beneath summaries. They probed assumptions. They requested scenario modelling. Inside the company, this was interpreted as diligence, as procurement rigour, as standard governance. It was actually distance. The client had begun to sense a gap between surface assurance and operational complexity. Not deception, not dishonesty, compression. They were being told things were stable, but their own experience of delivery suggested volatility. Minor surprises accumulated. A deadline that slipped slightly. A resource change communicated later than expected. A dependency issue revealed after it had already constrained options. Each event was explainable, each incident recoverable. Individually, none justified termination. Collectively, they altered perception. Trust rarely collapses in a single moment. It thins. The renewal conversation approached without visible tension. There were no heated exchanges, no formal complaints, no threat of litigation. In fact, the tone remained courteous. But when commercial discussions began, the client's posture had shifted. They were less expansive about future scope, more guarded about commitment, more focused on contingency planning. Internally, this was attributed to market pressure, budget scrutiny, industry headwinds. All plausible explanations. But beneath those factors sat a quieter dynamic. The organisation had moved from shared navigation of uncertainty to managed presentation of certainty. Originally, the relationship had involved tension in the open. Questions were raised early. Risks were explored collaboratively. Ambiguity was acknowledged in real time. Over time, that texture reduced. Updates became cleaner. Risk was discussed once stabilised. Uncertainty was resolved internally before being exposed externally. The system had optimised for reassurance, and reassurance, when over-polished, can create fragility. By the time the client decided not to renew, there was no dramatic event to point to. No single misstep, no identifiable breach of trust. Just an accumulated sense that they were being informed late rather than early. When feedback was requested, the language was careful. We would have preferred earlier visibility. We felt surprised by certain developments. We needed more transparency around emerging risks. From the organisation's perspective, transparency had never been removed. From the client's perspective, it had narrowed. The difference was not factual accuracy, it was timing and texture. Each internal decision had been rational, each presentation technically correct, each reassurance grounded in genuine belief. Together, they reshaped how trust travelled between company and client. Confidence had replaced co-navigation. Certainty had replaced shared interpretation. By the time the renewal window opened, the emotional account balance had already shifted. The loss was not explosive. It was procedural. A contract not extended. Revenue redirected. In the internal review, the focus returned to competitive. Pricing strategy, market dynamics, procurement leverage. All relevant. But long before the email arrived, something else had changed. The system had learned to polish tension rather than expose it. And when tension is polished too effectively, warning signs become invisible. Nothing here was accidental, but very little was deliberate.